Right, good evening and welcome to tonight's City of Burnside's Council meeting on August the 8th, 2023, opening at 7 p.m. Welcome to all of those who are present here in the Council chamber and to those who are watching from home. Before we commence, would you please turn off your mobile phones or place them on silent if you haven't done so already, as they are not to be used during Council meetings. Please stand and remain silent during the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are important to the Kaurna people today. We pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to all those who have sacrificed their lives for this country and its people. We also consider in our thoughts all those who today are being affected by war around the globe, and especially those in Ukraine. Finally, we seek guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. Just a reminder to use your microphones to register your intent to enter the debate and wait until I ask you to speak. Please turn your microphone off when you finish speaking, and please be respectful and patient while listening to another speaker, and do not interrupt or interject during the debate. Each person has 3 minutes and a warning bell at 2. Now to the agenda, which is a short one, and there are a number of deputations, and there's only one report for questions if desired. I have no apologies, you can see everyone's here tonight, and no leave of absence. Declaration of interest. Is there anyone who has a declaration of interest tonight? No? Then we'll move on to the confirmation of minutes. I need someone to move the minutes be accepted, and that is Councillor Dawes. Your microphone is on.
They swapped.
Oh, we swapped. Okay, you've got to swap your microphones over.
Oh.
Just, yeah.
Oh, I forgot about that.
So is it you, Councillor Turnbull, who wanted to move to confirm the minutes? Okay. All right. I'll accept because of the microphone. So, Councillor Turnbull, you're going to move the minutes be received. And I have a seconder in Councillor Zing. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Sorry? I've got a... Oh, you wanted to ask a question in relation to the minutes?
No, it's not about the minutes. Oh. I'm after the minutes. Madam Mayor, I wish to withdraw item 13.4 from the agenda.
That's the rescission motion,
yes,
the Reconciliation Action Plan. Yep, that's within your right. You put it there, so if you want to withdraw it, that's fine. That does potentially have an impact on those who have come to do deputations tonight. However, you have come, and if you wish to still do your deputation, you also have the right to speak as you choose to. So when we get to that item, I'll ask you.
Madam Mayor,
sorry?
I've got a question.
In relation to the minutes?
Well, in relation to what Councillor Turnbull just moved.
All right, question? All right.
The question is, does Councillor Turnbull intend bringing it back or letting it lapse completely? That I can't. I don't think Councillor Turnbull has indicated that in any way. Whether or not she chooses to do that, a rescission motion is allowed up until 12 months after a decision has been made. Correct? No, we can't preempt any decision that might come in the future. Public question time. We have no questions tonight. There are no presentations. There are 4 deputations, so I will work through those. First one was Susan Ditter. Do you wish to still speak, Susan? Yes, thank you. If you could come forward to the microphone in the middle, and if you could just identify your name and the suburb you live in, not your full address. And then your time starts as soon as you start talking, okay?
Thank you. I'm Susan Louise Ditter and I live in Glenunga. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. Thank you for your time. I have a long history with Burnside Council, having grown up to the Common Beaumont, an address I loved because of the double meaning. My mother's best friend, Coralie Soward, was Mayor of Burnside from 1979 to 1982, following roles as councillor and alderman from 1968. I remember many conversations with my parents about her work in these roles. I also have very happy memories of my first visit to the new and wonderful Burnside Library and how excited I was as a 7-year-old. I've returned to South Australia and Burnside Council area after more than 20 years interstate and overseas, and I feel privileged to be a resident. Quoting from Welcome Australia's website, in their list Challenge and Opportunity, they say, many institutions, communities and individuals lack the knowledge and resources to cultivate a culture of welcome. I'm proud that my council has, at such an important time, introduced a specific anti-racism statement. Council is saying the City of Burnside is a safe place for all people. Councillors were provided opportunities to give feedback during the development of the Reconciliation Action Plan, the 2022 draft itemising the inclusion of the anti-racism statement. The RAP working group ensured that consultation engagement with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander stakeholders was at its centre. To some, it is a surprise that this is needed at all, that it has to be clear and specific. To those who have experienced bullying, racial slurs, or any other form of discrimination, perhaps once, or perhaps for most of their lives, it is clearly essential. It is a reminder that not everyone always feels safe. Not everyone has a sense of belonging. This has not been my experience, but I know how much belonging meant to me as a child and as a young person. As has been stated in reports to Council, this work will turn positive intentions into action, building trust and respect, and increase understanding between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and non-Indigenous people. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just remain there, if there's anyone who wishes to ask a question. No, wait a minute, yes, Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Susan, for coming in. We have a similar, I was away for 20 years too, and I've come back to the City of Burnside, so we're very similar. I'm just intrigued how you knew about this, because I was on leave at the time, and I don't know if you're a regular watcher of YouTube or what, but how are you aware of what happened at last council meeting?
I was here.
Oh, right.
But the reason was I have been looking at various councils, but especially my own, to see if they have a reconciliation action plan. I've worked with organisations and been on the boards of organisations who've worked very hard to do them, and I know it's a real investment, both financially and by time. And so I looked, and I found on Councillor Hallett's focus information in
Yeah,
the magazine that she was working on the RAP, and so I was delighted.
Thank you.
I don't have anyone else who's on my screen to ask you a question, so can I just thank you very much for coming in and doing your presentation to us.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I'll call upon Mr. Simon, is it Ho or Howe? I was right, Ho. Okay. Please come forward, Mr. Howe.
Thank you.
And again, just your name and your suburb.
Sure. Good evening, mayors and councillors for City of Burnside. My name is Simon Ho. I'm a councillor for City of Adelaide. I am a long-term resident of Burnside. I've been living in Burnside over the last 17 years. I come here tonight with a pressing concern. Back to July 2022, the City of Burnside achieved a notable feat, the conditional endorsement from Reconciliation Australia for its Reflect Reconciliation Action Plan. Central to this plan is the promotion of harmony and anti-discrimination. And the Burnside Reconciliation Action Plan Working Group had wisely identified the development of an anti-racism statement as vital. They were further supported by the Racism It Stops With Me initiative from the Human Rights Commission. I was filled with pride when I learned that Burnside Council have endorsed the anti-racism statement. It reinforced my decision to make Burnside my home, knowing that the leadership and the inclusivity it represents. However, the potential retraction of this statement deeply concerns me. That's why I'm here tonight. Let me share my thoughts on this issue from three different perspectives. First, commitment to action. In local government, it is easy to make statements that resonate well but lack substance. City of Burnside, however, have showcased leadership by not only endorsing a significant statement, but by pairing it together with an actionable measure. This collaborative approach between the elected body and the administration body promise a brighter future for all of us, irrespectively of their heritage. Second, the reality of racism. In interviews with ABC and SBS a few years back, I expressed that I had never encountered racism in Adelaide. I was lucky. But my interaction with various community members painted a starkly different picture. The privilege of residing in Burnside showed me from harsh reality others face. But stepping outside of my comfort zone and embracing public spaces, I too felt the cold bite of discrimination. I challenged those who doubt the magnitude of this issue to try and witness it for themselves. At last, learning from the past, remember when many local governments hesitated on declaring a climate change emergency a few years back. Some people even call it climate change is just a religion. But today, the urgency of such decision is undeniable. Likewise, we must not brush aside racism until it becomes out of control. To sum up, the anti-racism statement adopted by City of Burnside was more than just words. It was a promise. To rescind it would send a message that we are retracting our commitment to our communities. I urge the members to stand by the statement and reject the motion to rescind. And yeah, on one hand, I encourage all the members do not support the motion, and on the other hand, thank you, Councillor Turnbull, to withdraw the motion, and hopefully you will not bring it back in the future. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak out tonight. I really appreciate it, and I wasn't aware that I was not the only one, and thank you for all the others who come here for deputation on the same issue. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to ask a question? Councillor Zing.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Ho, for coming today, and also Councillor Henry Davis from City of Adelaide. Good to see you again. Just a quick question. Does City of Adelaide have an Indigenous working group of a similar nature?
Not at this stage. I mean, I was talking to the lawmaker as well as the CEO. It's my intention that to have something similar. I mean, we basically like try to learn from Burnside, and City of Burnside definitely showed the leadership, and that's something I like to see happen in City of Adelaide as well.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you very much for coming in, Councillor Ho. I noticed on the Racism Stops With Me website, under the supporters and partners area, under local government of all the local governments, the City of Adelaide is one of the supporters of the campaign. How did you become a supporter? Do you know, or...?
Well, I wasn't aware of this, like, not in much details, and indeed, like, tonight, because, like, basically, like, Councillor Singh has got a working group that he normally put in, like, give us the updates to all the, local Chinese residents who are actually living in Burnside about what's happening in Burnside Council. So that's how I actually learned that there's something happening here, and as soon as I heard that, well, that's a rescission motion going to be put up, I felt that I have to be here.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ho, for coming in and talking to us tonight. Now I'll call upon Ms. Kate Leaney.
Thank you. My name's Kate Leaney. I'm the Campaigns and Communications Manager of Welcoming Australia, part of the Welcoming Cities Initiative. Until recently, I lived in Kensington Gardens. I've moved into Blair Athol. I want to start by echoing the acknowledgement that we meet on Kaurna country and pay respects to elders past and present. And I want to recognise and thank council members for having us join you this evening, and to congratulate you on the draft Reconciliation Action Plan and Anti-Racism Statement, demonstrating your collective commitment to equality, inclusion and diversity. At Welcoming Australia, we aim to advance communities where everyone can belong, contribute and thrive. We achieve that by working alongside local councils, now 78 members across Australia, representative of over 40% of the Australian population, with 24 sport and recreation codes and more than 100 community clubs, as well as universities and workplaces. It's a broad range of members, and all of these members have one thing in common. Like here in the city of Burnside, they value communities who are built on the values of generosity and a fair go for all. We are one of the most culturally diverse nations in the world, where First Nations represent hundreds of tribes and language groups, people who have come from every corner of the globe to settle here, to build a life for their families and communities. Diversity is very much our reality. Inclusion, working together, valuing and embracing difference, making space to address past and ongoing injustices, and moving forward together, this is very much a choice that we make. And we work alongside councils just like yours, who grapple with multifaceted challenges in a complex world daily. We witness the most significant success when there is strong principled leadership and a clear commitment to bringing people together. An example I think of is Parramatta City Council and the Parramatta Dialogues Project, a series of community conversations that brought together multicultural and migrant communities and work with through workshops between those communities and First Nations communities to strengthen mutual understanding. These dialogues consisted of facilitated conversations that allow participants to share stories about themselves with each other. One feedback is, I wouldn't have dared open my mouth with a stranger before, and now my view is a stranger is just a friend that I haven't met yet. And this is reflective of the idea that effective leadership seeks to unite us. Sometimes that requires safe spaces and opportunities for people from diverse backgrounds to share experiences and build connections. Conversations about race and racism are difficult, but we have to make space to have them if we're to heal, grow and move forward together as a community. For many, this opportunity was their first chance to meet Indigenous Australians and talk with them directly, reflected in another quote saying, "I've always felt displaced as a migrant, but being welcomed by First Nations elders was so generous and affirming." This is reflective of the impact and power of principled leadership, taking the whole community on a journey, even when it's difficult. We do things even when they're hard, giving people something to aspire to and be proud of. This is the opportunity that stands before us and stands before you as council members. The Reconciliation Action Plan and the Racism It Stops With Us statement is one of many practical and positive steps that the City of Burnside can take, and I commend you on taking those already. And of course, you don't do this work alone. The Welcoming Cities Initiative and the resource of the Welcoming Cities Standard that I believe was included in a distribution tonight gives members unprecedented access to the kind of resources, support, peer-to-peer learning that can help to build welcoming and inclusive futures together. And it would be a missed opportunity if I didn't also encourage you to join that network and take advantage of that resource and connection. Something that we often reflect on and challenge ourselves on at Welcoming Australia is the idea of unlikely partners. We're apolitical, we believe in working together, and we'll work with anyone with which we can find even a single point of agreement. Do we agree that it's essential to be a good neighbour? Yes, absolutely, let's work together on that. Do we agree that people should have the opportunity for a better life for their families? Yes? Okay, good, let's work together on that. Do we agree that reconciliation is a good thing, a good idea? Yes, absolutely, let's work together on that. Do we agree that equality, diversity and inclusion, advancing communities where everyone can belong, contribute and thrive is a good idea? Yes, absolutely, let's work together on that. Approving a reconciliation action plan and an anti-racism statement, a collective statement on your commitment to equality is not about value for money for taxpayers, it's about a community vision that everyone can get behind. A vision that makes people proud to live in the city of Burnside, presents a better future for us all. And thank you for the ways in which you advance this, both here in this chamber and beyond. And thank you for the opportunity to share a little with you tonight.
Councillor Dawes, you have a question?
Thank you, Kate, for coming in. Just tell me, I haven't heard of welcoming cities before, and I said that Scanlon Foundation there. I'm guessing it's a private lobby group for the federal government. Just tell us a bit more. I'm only guessing, please.
No, so Welcoming Cities is apolitical non-government,
Yeah.
so it falls under the umbrella of Welcoming Australia, which is a not-for-profit organisation that aims to cultivate a culture of welcome in our communities. Welcoming Cities works with local governments, local councils to build welcoming and inclusive futures for all of our residents, provides a standard which is included tonight so that councils can benchmark their welcoming and inclusion work against a standard of how we can better do that work, how we can learn from each other rather than, you know, operating in silos and spending lots of resources in starting everything from scratch. We do a lot of peer-to-peer learning across networks, state to state, council to council. So it operates completely separate to layers of government and we're a support to councils.
So my next question is, how are you funded? Is that through the Scanlon Foundation?
Partly through the Scanlon Foundation, that's one of our major funders. We also have individual community, a lot of our support is individual supporters, connections with corporate donors, other philanthropics, and some of our programs under the broader banner of Welcoming Australia, so welcoming clubs, welcoming universities, welcoming workplaces, welcoming centre and the welcoming precinct. I'm not going to say welcoming any more times, are funded throughout different grants and things like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilkins.
Oh, thank you, Kate, for coming in. I note that you're based in Collins Street in Melbourne, and one of my questions was funders. Who are they? And who are your members on your advisory committee? I'm just trying to find them.
Yeah, so Welcoming Australia is a national organisation. So we have offices in Melbourne, Brisbane, here, and staff in New South Wales. So our kind of core location for receiving mail is in Melbourne, but we're based all throughout. And like my answer to Councillor Dawes, a lot of our funding is through the Scanlon Foundation and
Can you tell me more about the foundation? Who is this particular person?
So it's a philanthropic foundation who work to advance social cohesion in Australia through a number of avenues and relationships and partnerships.
And are you based in Melbourne or are you
No,
based
I'm based here.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Kate, for coming in. I had a trip to Melbourne and I sat next to a gentleman from Melbourne and he was very much involved in the faith communities and the council, St Kilda Council I think it was. Are you involved in those interfaith committees that councils seem to have in Melbourne? And it's all about raising awareness about within each group. For example, if you're from Asia, India, across that part of our world, we can't just label one group of people. There are many different faiths, and raising awareness of that in Australia. Do you work? So my question is, do you work with them as well? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we support wherever our councils would like to. Bring us into. I should sit on my hands. So, yeah, a number of interfaith initiatives that our councils run and we support.
Yep.
Particularly in New South Wales, there's a lot of interfaith work that's being run and supported by our staff member there.
Do you think that's something we need to do in Burnside, have interfaith?
I think it's a
type
really
committees, yeah?
important initiative anywhere, anywhere that you have a diverse group of community. We want to see connections across faiths, across generations, across backgrounds that can only build our welcoming, inclusive, compassionate, bright future the more that we do connections like that.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Hallett.
I think my question, Kate, is a bit similar to Councillor Henschke. Sorry, I had a mental block. Thank you for coming. Really appreciated your talk. I just got a question in regard to, with your experience of working across local government and across corporations, across sporting bodies, would you say that having an anti-racism statement is good practice?
Absolutely. Something that we can get together behind and agree on, and having a grounding statement that can bring everyone together is really important. The reality is that we are an incredibly diverse nation, but the reality that goes along with that is that the benefits of that multiculturalism, that connection, are not enjoyed by all of us. And in a multicultural nation, if instances of racism happen, there's an Angela Davis quote, it's not enough to not be racist in a racist society, in a society that includes all of us. We need to be anti-racist. So being able to bring people together under a combining statement that speaks to, and I've read the statement that was put forward, it's collective. It's something that is about all of us and brings us all together, about the community that we want to live in. And so to answer your question in a very long, rambling way, yes, it's very important, I think.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. I don't have anyone else on my screen, so thank you very much, Kate, for coming in. And our fourth deputy is Mr. David Winderlich.
Hear me all right? Thank you very much, Mayor and councillors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for having it so early so I can get to another important council engagement, which is the 8 p.m. screening of Barbie at the Regal Cinema. I just checked with Kate that Welcome to Australia actually began in South Australia, so that's probably relevant knowledge. Given that the council is not going to be debating tonight whether or not to have an anti-racism statement, I thought I might actually switch my remarks to how to make it as good as possible. Because while it's good to have, I have to say I've worked in government and have been on local council in Norwood, Payneham, St Peters. I'm a resident, I didn't say, from Linden Park. It looks very much like your standard ticker box statement, where it would be very easy to tick a lot of boxes and not change much. So I think it's really important to turn our attention to how to avoid that fate. Maybe down the track there'll be more of this, but when I read through I thought, well, there's a lot of activity, not clear about outcomes. What are we actually trying to achieve half the time, and how will we know when we've succeeded? And I know it's not always easy to measure that, but that's lacking. There's understandably a very strong focus on Indigenous issues, but in the last few years we had racism against Chinese Australians due to the so-called Wuhan flu, and the Charles Sturt University did some research in 2019 that showed that 30 mosques had suffered arson attacks in Australia, which is quite surprising. But so although understandably the focus will be Indigenous, perhaps it's worth thinking about how we bring some of those other aspects of racism into the picture a bit. The statement's really big on symbolism. There's lots of cultural protocols, there's lots of education, lots of respect. At the end of this process, we'll all be a lot more knowledgeable and a little smokier, but surely one of the main reasons we're considering these issues is because of the absolutely dire state of affairs for Indigenous people in terms of all those closing the gap issues, life expectancy, incarceration, all those things. Half the young people detained in Australia today are Indigenous, and they're a tiny proportion of the population. So although those things are important and will increase understanding, I'd just like to make a few random suggestions about things that are within Council's power to actually do something about substantial issues as well as symbolic ones. The statement says we're on Kaurna land. Council says we're on Kaurna land. Just a thought, maybe we could give back a smidge for some community purpose. That would be within Council's power. It would probably be controversial, it would require a lot of discussion, but it's something to think about. Aboriginal communities are often very small. They are dealing with very complicated problems. They have huge governance challenges. There's a lot of governance expertise in this organisation. There could be secondments, there could be exchanges. A lot of mutual learning could happen in that, but many Indigenous leaders would benefit, I think, from the opportunity to spend time in a well-resourced organisation like this. You have an employment element to this statement. It would be good if there were targets. Start thinking about what they might be. There is something about supplier diversity, but why couldn't Burnside Council actually attempt to mobilise the substantial purchasing power of this affluent community by promoting Indigenous businesses? Council doesn't have to spend any money. Every now and then it just features one in the newsletter or something. And the residents will make their choice as consumers. Just a couple of last remarks about how to approach this. It's I think, very good community-minded people have reservations about this. They have reservations about the voice, and we have to consider, if we are proponents of those things, why that is. And I think the things we must avoid in this process are any sense that we are lecturing people or feeling morally superior if they don't agree. We have to avoid demanding conformity to whatever the new ideas, policies, regimes are. There's quite a bit of research around on how diversity training backfires when you make it compulsory. I think that's quite something to reflect on. And lastly, we need to start thinking about how we present these things not as some shiny new idea, but as just the logical continuation of the way we do business. You're broke, you can get an extension on your rates, or maybe a concession. We prevent bushfires and we prevent racism. It's just who we are. We need to somehow, I think, downplay it a little, create that feeling that this is just part of our ethos.
Thank you. Is anyone who wishes to ask a question of Mr. Windley? No?
I'll go to Barbie.
No. Councillor Dawes has a good question.
I was very interested in your last statement, which I must agree with. You said diversity programs, if you make them mandatory, they don't work.
That does seem to be what the research suggests.
Yeah. From your experience, and you've been in local government, etc., how do we make them work then? Is it through education? I'm just interested in your views as to...
Are you asking me about diversity programs?
Yeah.
I'm not claiming any particular expertise to that, but I think, how do you persuade anyone of anything? You don't usually do it by assuming the moral high ground. You know, you listen as much as you talk, you go gently, you go slowly. I mean, that's just I just think that's my general philosophy. They might pretend to agree if you go the other way, but you won't win them over. I understand the vote on this matter was narrow last time. That means it could flip. If you really want it to stick long term, you have to do the groundwork to actually win people's hearts and minds, not just their outward conformity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Winderluke, for coming along tonight.
I've got a question.
Oh, sorry, you didn't get it up. Do you mind just...
Sorry, I hope I'm not making you miss Barbie.
I'll be in trouble with the family.
But in regard to, I think you were making some statements around not just being symbolism, but getting real sort of with actions. Then do you think having an anti-racism statement is at least showing some leadership to our city in regard to, this is what we believe and we're not going to tolerate incidences of racism. We'll stand up against it. Do you think that that's worthwhile in itself?
I do think it's worthwhile, but as I said, I think we're having this discussion to a significant degree because the material conditions of Indigenous people are appalling. If they are appalling, you know, life expectancy, health, imprisonment. I think if that wasn't the case, I think that's what's bubbling underneath a lot of this. And I think the general statement is important, but if we are considering this issue, we should also be considering how we address the core that's bubbling underneath it, that's generating a lot of this discussion. A lot of the symbolism and cultural stuff is good, it's important, it's good we understand more. We have to be careful it doesn't become a substitute for action that makes us all feel virtuous and good.
Yeah, sort of like I often say, putting your money where your mouth is.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the deputies who came along tonight for your time and your efforts and your preparation. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you look at it, there is no debate because the motion has been withdrawn from tonight's meeting. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is a petition, and I seek a mover and a seconder for the petition. Councillor Harvey.
I'll move it. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Hallett. I think you might have had your microphone on still. Okay. Now it's Councillor Harvey. You're moving that motion?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And Councillor Davey, you're seconding it. And is there any discussion? No. Any discussion from anyone? Then I will put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Sorry, Mayor's activity report. Do I have a mover? Councillor Dawes?
I just want to move it.
Moving it.
Yes.
Councillor Harvey?
I'd like to ask a question,
You can.
please.
Seconding.
I need a seconder first.
You can second.
Councillor Wilkins has agreed to second, and now Councillor Harvey, you've got...
Thank you, Mayor. In relation to a question that is on notice, was it recorded in the Mayor's activity report of your attendance at the Voice to Parliament meeting at Adelaide City Council on the 22nd of June?
Yes, it was. It was in my Mayor's report from back in June. It was certainly there.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you wish to know? I'm happy to share any comments or commentary about it. Next. Sorry. Oh, right, yes. Those in favour of that, of accepting the report, those against, motion is carried. Now, we had a large number of questions on notice, and you have received all of those answers to those questions on notice. There's no discussion on those. If you wish to follow up, that's up to you to do that. We now move to the motions on notice, which is item 13, and it's 13.1, and the first one. Sorry, Councillor Hallett.
I've got a question. Oh, sorry.
I have a question on item 12.2.
No, there aren't any questions on notice.
Oh, okay.
All right, no debate on questions on notice. If you have a further question, then you can put it in at the next council, for the next council meeting, if you've got a subsequent question.
Okay.
Now we move, as I said, 13.1, and that is Councillor Jones. Page 21.
Good evening, colleagues. Look, it seems a very long time since I put this motion in, because it's first we had a fire alarm, then we had a lengthy debate, and there wasn't enough time to debate this. But finally I get my moment in the sun. So hooray for me. Look, I was incensed one Friday evening, reading my council papers, and there was an info doc from the Brownhill Keswick Creek where they were seriously proposing to bury a creek 1.7 kilometres long, that's over a mile in real distance, in concrete. And I could not believe it. And these guys have got form, because they did the same thing in the city of Unley a few years ago and egregiously celebrated it in their glossy documents that they give us. This is totally contrary to the City of Burnside's policy on creeks and watercourses. Creeks are extraordinarily valuable environmentally and socially, which is why our council thinks they should remain open. So for a council subsidiary to actively promote enclosing creeks just made my blood boil. And I hope it made your blood boil. And I hope that you will agree with this modest measure of writing to the board of this subsidiary saying, hey, we don't like what you're doing. We're a member of the subsidiary. We think you should pay some attention to our views. And I think it's also, and I put on the end of this motion, is we need to find out a bit more about this subsidiary, because the more I dig into it, the worse it becomes. Now, I actually think we're stuck with it. I think it was the 2006-10 council who signed us up to this horror, and we're kind of stuck with it. But if we are stuck with it, then we should exercise our powers to steer it in the direction that we wish it to go. And one way is to say, when they're doing bad environmental things, is to stand up and say, we don't like what you're doing, and our power effectively is to refuse to appoint board members. And if you don't do what we want, we will exercise that power against you. So be warned, people. So look, I hope you'll support the motion. I think it's a pretty modest thing, and yeah, vote for me.
Councillor Wilkins, you're seconding?
I'm more than happy to support my fellow councillor on this matter. I do recall that it was a long time ago that this came into fruition, and we have expended a lot of money as our share of this particular project for stormwater, and I think they do need to come back and actually give us an update on the whole program and see how much we have actually completed of this project and how much and what their plans are for the future. Because I think we should have more, as Councillor Jones said, open creeks like the one that goes through Tusmore and kids paddle in it, keep away from it when it is raging torrent. And I agree, let's have a visit from them, let's get them to present to council all about where we've come from, where we're going, and what outcomes can we expect and when, and how much. So I urge you to support the motion.
Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. I actually agree with that, that it just seems totally the wrong thing to do to be changing a natural water course or an almost natural water course into a concrete pipe that's a mile long. However, I do support what the CEO has recommended, the changes to the motion, because I would like to ask if we ask the project director and the chairperson to outline the rationale for enclosing the creek. I mean, there must be some rationale, and I'd like to understand it in order to know why that's the way they're wanting to go, because it just seems like, you know, an environmental disaster. So I would recommend what the CEO suggested, changes to the recommendation A, B, and perhaps another one that says that we would ask the project director and chairperson to outline the rationale for enclosing the creek and the identified locations as opposed to a natural water course.
Before I move to the next speaker, I'll ask the CEO to respond.
No. You weren't seeking an amendment, you were just commenting on the CEO's response to the motion. Am I correct?
Just as a general comment, Madam Mayor, I think it's important to note that where, and I think to call them creeks is perhaps not the right way to describe them. They are very much a shadow of the former selves. The councils in question have actually resolved and have been, in essence, approving the action. And quite a lot of times they are, I'll call them substantial pipes, but are being converted to bicycle and pedestrian paths and beautified with significant tree plantings. So I just think these needs to be viewed in context of what they're actually achieving. Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, quite complex question for the administration first, if I may. Item 1 there notes that the policy of the City of Burnside, the open watercourses be preserved. So as the CEO just described, if we have an open watercourse like in Tusmore Park, we preserve it. And piped watercourses, or maybe bricked up open channels, piped, be returned to open channel where feasible. Now this policy we have, where feasible, depends on how much money we've got. My question is, do we have enough money in the City of Burnside where we have a open channel to keep them as open channels?
Through Madam Mayor, as Councillor Harvey's quite rightly pointed out, our policy, as I've stated on page 22 there, is that open watercourses will be preserved. So in short, you won't see any recommendations from this administration coming back to council to close creeks. And again, just to put context on this conversation, all the works of Brownhill Keswick Creek in the City of Burnside have been completed. There are no further works for that drainage program to be completed in the City of Burnside. It is all further downstream, for want of a better expression, and primarily now within the City of West Torrens.
Sorry, just to clarify my question, I didn't make it clear. My question was, do we have enough money in the City of Burnside to keep our open channels open?
Through Madam Mayor, I may not be understanding clearly, but if we've got an open channel, I'm not closing it, so I don't need any extra money to do that. Are you talking about maintaining the channel?
Open, yeah. If we have an open channel, it's clear our policy says we keep it open, and my question is, have we got enough money to keep them open and maintain them open?
I think when it's saying keep them open, it means the alternative is to close it, and I'm not seeking to close any, so I don't need any funds.
You don't need funds. That's what I
don't need any additional funds.
That's my next question.
To achieve this
if you need more money to do that, well, I'll quickly speak because this is a problem. Money is a problem, and Councillor Jones is looking confused. Like, why is Councillor Henschke talking about this? And that's because we do have open channels throughout Toorak Gardens, for example, which are being closed up as we speak. And Brownhill Keswick Creek is the mother river that feeds all our little channels. And it's probably the situation where there's just not enough money to keep our channels open. So sadly, I have before me residents who are upset about an open channel that's been closed up in Toorak Gardens. And why? It's because it's just not financially feasible for us as a council to keep them open. That's why it's cheaper just to put a box culvert on top of these open channels. So it is concerning and upsetting what Brownhill Keswick Creek projects are doing, but it is about money, and our policies do depend on budgets.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, could I just seek a ruling here? Along the lines of Councillor Hallett, I agree with the CEO's recommendations. Can I move an amendment, or do we have to vote on this motion first? And that's not really an amendment because it's too much of a change to the original motion on notice.
I think we will seek some governance report on this. To me, I suspect we have to vote this down before an alternative is put up in its place. That's the way I see it at the moment, but if I am incorrect in that. Remember that this project was a 1 in 200 year flooding project that began a number of years ago when they were talking about possibly even putting in a dam in Mitcham above Brownhill Creek to dam the water back. There was a huge amount of opposition to that dam being built because of the potential destruction of the natural flow of the creek and of the landscape. So there have been a lot of things, and this was a 5-council agreement to go into the future, and we have a number of times sought funding from, or the organisation has sought funding from 2 federal governments to get money to try to advance the project sooner to save money in the long term. Anyway. Yeah, it is. That's what I just said. I was right. So this would have to be defeated before an alternate motion is put up.
Yeah, so okay. I'll speak now
yes,
if I can. You know, I think when these motions come up, and you know, I thank Councillor Jones for the motion, sometimes we need to get information back first to understand. So I thought that what the CEO is recommending there was exactly that. We invite Peter, who's the project director and the chairperson of the board, coming in, talk to us, we'll have an information session, and then we can come back to it with further discussion. So I think that's the way to go. The other one, a small matter, just the first line, and I might be a bit pedantic here, but it's got Councillor Jones gave notice of their intention. Can we make that his intention? I hope we're not going to go down the pathway of, can we just make sure that happens in the future? The first time I've seen it was in this agenda, but I will be voting against it only because I want more information.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I'll be voting against it in line with what some other councillors have already said. My main concerns are, I'm not a hydrologist. I don't understand the water courses and the amount of water that needs to go down there. I'm presuming in West Torrens they're going to need to, it is a culvert at the moment. My mother used to have a property with this culvert, the creek. It's a concrete culvert at the moment, running at the back of her property that would flood. I'd imagine they need to make it deeper. And when you make something a lot deeper, it's a lot unsafe for children to get out of when it starts flooding. So which might be the reason why they want to actually put a cap on the top of it and then put a bikeway on top of it like they have through Unley, and then they can put trees and reeds and stuff. Looks very pretty. I've ridden down that little, well, it's a big pipe now, but I've ridden down that quite often. I don't disagree with the sentiment. I like the sentiment. I'd like to actually see how much it might actually cost. So let's bring them in and see. 12 million extra to buy the properties to widen this thing so we can actually make it a creek. I'm happy to entertain that if that's how much it's going to cost us to buy all those properties as a regional subsidiary. But let's bring them in and work out how much it's going to cost, and let's discuss it with them first before we just write and put our name on a letter saying that we, you know, this is the way that we think it should be done without actually doing that consultation. So I'm with the others. I'm happy to approve the CEO's recommendation to bring them in and have a conversation first. Thank you.
Councillor Hallett, do you have another question, or do you wish to enter the debate?
I have got another question, and it's something else that I'd like to know, and I'd like to ask if they do come and give us a presentation, is what's the impact of forcing aquatic life through, you know, long concrete channels? It might look pretty having a pathway on the top and that, but what's the actual damage that it's doing to the environment by forcing it? You know, I'm talking about insect life, fish, platypuses, apparently we've got them, so on. So, yeah, just that's one of the things I'd like to ask as well. But I actually support Dawes and Councillor Cornish's statements.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. Just noting the concerns raised around the council about closing in and closing our watercourses. Of course, we've got our creeks that go through our parks that are well known and loved. Is it a fact that it's only during development that watercourses would be closed in? When people are either developing their homes or there's a subdivision going on, and that I understand is when the issue of closing the watercourse comes up.
Through Madam Mayor, my understanding is it does happen then, but it also happens as part of this project. They're reviewing all the drainage channels that the Brandhill Creek flows into. So, as an example that I'm picturing, there are a number of examples where, similar to our back lanes that we have through the city of Burnside, there are numerous examples where instead of a lane, there is the remnants of an old creek or a drainage watercourse that is running through. It already has its own easement and is bounded by the back of numerous properties. So this is the example that I think Councillor Jones might be alluding to, and certainly Brownhill Keswick Creek have done a number of projects on where they go through that easement that already exists and deal with it.
Councillor Hubel.
Thank you, Worship. In response to some of the comments and with the blessing of my learned friend here, I want to have a go at an amendment, if possible, that puts in effect the CEO's suggestion to replace the fifth point with the paragraphs A and B as suggested. Does that work from a governance point of view?
I'm actually not quite sure what you wanted to do. Yeah, I'm looking on the screen at the moment.
So in point 4 of the CEO's comments,
Oh, okay.
it suggested that the points A and B there replace the fifth point in the motion and notice submitted by Councillor Jones.
Through Madam, just for clarity, so essentially the key action point for this motion is the last 2 points. So the first one that's there is an action saying we write prior to receiving the information. I'd still say it's a substantial change, so and it's essentially an alternate motion.
Yes. We can still check with our governance people.
So sorry, are we replacing point 1? Are we replacing point 2 with A and B? Is that right?
For 4B.
So 4B is similar to.
Yep.
I see no objection to changing mine 2
Yep.
to that, and then you'd be inserting a point above that to invite them to come and speak to us.
Yep. So just to be clear, I understand that, but that would then assume that you're saying take the action of saying that we are opposed to closing watercourses, so you want to resolve that, and then you want to invite them in.
Yeah.
I'd argue, what's the purpose of inviting them in? If you're going to take that action, if you're going to take that action before you hear the evidence.
I have to point out that during our previous, I think it's 4 years ago, might be 5 years ago, Councillor Cornish, when they did come and do a presentation to us to explain the nature and the purpose and the direction of this whole project, so that we were all familiar. And it's before your time. I'm sure it must have been 5 years ago, It was certainly during yours, Councillor Wilkins and Davey and Councillor Cornish, when Peter did come and do a presentation to us to explain how the project worked, what our commitment was, how our financial commitment was part of the whole project, when the biggest commitment is actually West Torrens, because they are the largest area concerned. They're also the area that is most likely to flood because it is so flat, and because potentially it could also flood the entire Adelaide airport, and the potential destruction or the chaos that would be caused as a result of that. So, because we were a part of an agreement to be part of that project, and that was done at least 6 years ago. Councillor Davis can nod, he probably remembers as well, sitting in the room. So I think I can't say to you that it's important to hear from the Creek Authority again, but I think it is really important. No matter what questions we ask, that is absolutely essential. What we have to determine now is whether we go ahead and vote this down or vote it up as it is, and if this gets voted down, then we replace it with another motion. Is that correct?
It is correct, Madam Mayor, but I have a creative solution to suggest.
Good, let me turn this off.
If the mover and the seconder were of the mind to agree to a variation, for example, if points you've got points 1, 2 and 3, stay there, because they are simply noting certain things. And then the second point 1 and 2 are removed and replaced with the CEOs A and B. Now there's a nuance here because I think Councillor Jones wanted to keep his point 1 still in.
Yes.
But it's just a suggestion. It's just a suggestion.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Jones, that we keep that council 1, 2 and 3, and therefore A and B and point 4 on page 23 replaces 1 and 2? You correct? You happy with that? And Councillor Wilkins, you happy with that as well? All right. So therefore the motion, are you able to fix that, Helen? It's done already. Invites Project Director, Chairperson of the Board of the Creek Project to present a council information session, and then receive a report from administration on the background, objectives, operations, etc. That will be an opportunity for people to ask questions, clarify in their mind, and then if they want to go further with another resolution, another motion after that event, then that is a possibility later. As a result of, we're working with knowledge base rather than a lack of knowledge. Some of us here have got a little more knowledge than others around the table, but we all have to have the same amount of knowledge and understanding in order to be able to make sensible decisions. Yeah, exactly. All right. Happy with that? Councillor Jones, do you wish to sum up now? Or?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, certainly you can ask.
This is a question that hopefully clear up Councillor Henschke's confusion about First Creek, which is a tributary of the Torrens, not part of Brownhill Keswick Creek. Can you tell me which parts of First Creek councillors covered up in Turret Gardens?
I'll have to take that on notice, Councillor Jones.
All right. Now, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? I've got no one on the screen. If that's the case, I'd like to go to Councillor Jones. I know, Councillor Davey, you wish to speak or ask a question?
Thank you. No, I'll just briefly speak in support. Thank you, everyone, for this variation, which has now become an amendment. I think this is a very sensible way to go to get this information, or to note our commitment to maintaining our open creeks and watercourses, which is our policy. And two, that we, the new council, we've got 5 new council members. I think it's timely that we have a briefing on the Brownhill Creek Stormwater Project, and also for us long-standing people here to have an update about the whole operation and what it's costing and all of that. So I think this is a really good motion, and I'm very happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Jones, do you wish to speak? Just finalise?
Look, if I was feeling snarky, colleagues, I would point out that they've had 5 years to invite themselves round to address us about their great project and what we're spending $10 million on, and they haven't. So you might form your own judgment on that, but I hope you'll support the motion.
Thank you. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Yes, we did. Sorry, on page 24 I didn't have my microphone on. Councillor Jennings.
Nina Marnie, 2023, we've got a bit of a waste problem. It's not just Burnside Council, it's every council. Waste comes in many shapes and many forms, and if we can just try to keep a little bit out of the regular trash cycle, every little bit helps. So I'm hoping that Burnside can implement what Mr. Cowley has put forward, which I thank him for doing the hard yards here. Running a trial for 2 years, and we can try to get people to use reusable nappies where you've got a cloth liner and you've got a biodegradable bit that carries the waste and can go into the compost bin. So I was going to email out before, but I ran out of time today, that the CSIRO they've begun a trial of biodegradable nappies which are turned pretty much into compost, just like Jeffrey's is doing with our green bins. That's nappies. Women's sanitary items. So there is items out there, my partner calls them period undies, but I'm sure there's a more marketable name for them. I'm not sure what it is, but it is keeping waste out of the ground, and menstrual cups puts it straight into the wastewater. It's a pretty simple trial. I think I feel the budget of $10,000 per annum will cover it, and with a thorough social media campaign and education, hopefully if we can get people, if we can get ladies using these products early in their lives, it will become a lifelong lesson. So, thank you.
Councillor Zing, you wish to second it?
Yeah, happy to second, Mayor.
And do you wish to speak now?
I know I might.
All right. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, just a question first of administration. I just want to clarify. We are saying a budget of $10,000 next year. That goes into the melting pot, am I right here? And it is not necessarily going to be approved until we know what the full budget looks like next year. So this is a case for adding it into the budget and for consideration. Am I correct in stating that? Or is it there definitely, no matter what?
Through Madam Mayor, Councillor Dawes is correct. This would be going into the draft budget for consideration as part of the whole. Yes.
If we approve this tonight. Councillor Jones.
Look, Councillor Dawes has asked the question that I was going to say. This might be a worthy idea, although I spoke to my old mum and she snorted with derision at the idea of bringing back cloth nappies. But it should be a budget bid, and it should go in with all the other budget bids, and we have a budget process. And look, fair play to Councillor Jennings, he does what everybody else does and tries to subvert the budget process, but what we should do is this should be a budget bid, and we shouldn't automatically put it through into next year's budget, because who knows what other great ideas people might have. And as we know, a lot of people's budget bids last time were disappointed So I don't think we should just vote for the first good idea that comes along. It should be a fair process for all. So, regrettably, I won't be supporting it.
Mr Kelly?
Madam Mayor, I do need to clarify that, as per my previous answer, the intention is that this goes into the draft budget bid process. It's not. That's not what the motion says. I'm certainly happy to help with some words to clarify that. But the intention is that this would go into the draft process.
So perhaps you could work on where it might best fit into the motion while I'm asking Councillor Hallett to speak.
I'm still not clear. If we were to vote on this and approve it tonight, it goes into the draft budget, but it could still be pulled during that budget process. So it's not locked in, it's not set in stone.
That's correct, absolutely.
Okay.
It's just an early entry bid as opposed to waiting until January, but it's not confirmed, it just becomes part of the process. Councillor David.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I'm just a bit confused about costings here. If the trial's proposed for 2 years, I'm not sure why that would be, and I'd be interested to hear justification. And with a $10,000 budget, how would this be promoted? Because I would imagine it would need a significant promotion and education campaign that might eat up all of that money. Could you please give some...
Through you, Madam Mayor, as per the recommendation before you, it's saying that it'll be $10,000 per annum, so it'll be $20,000 over the 2 years. I asked Dr. Phil to do a bit of homework on this, just to look at what other local government authorities are doing in this space. They're not spending an exorbitant amount on promotion. They're relying on social media, so it's a relatively cheap form of promotion. And if we use our example, it'll probably be through our Focus magazine that we might look to promote it. So I'm not envisaging requesting of council any further advertising money to promote it. I think we could do it with existing resource, should council choose to pursue it.
Councillor Dawes.
Yeah, could I speak now? I'm having difficulty with Councillor Jennings because there are 3 levels of government here: state, federal and ourselves. And those that can have the most impact in this area are state and federal. We have this budget we're currently looking at in 23-24 have deferred a number of items involving parks and gardens and reserves and so forth. We didn't like it, but we did it to keep the rates down. So I just feel there's so much pressure on the budget where we can't have an insightful impact on our residents, then it's worthy. I accept what Councillor Jones says, but I don't think it's for us. And I'll be voting against it. I'm just thinking of my own daughter here and asking her to go to cloth nappies. I'm telling you, it should throw it at my face. I think the better way of doing it would be to say, at the federal and state government level, we want disposable nappies to be recyclable, and you need to ensure that they are recyclable in the future by a certain date. We've banned all sorts of things at the state government level, and it's worked, and South Australia's been the leader. So we might be able to do a little bit, but I think there's too much pressure on our budget this year and also next year. So I just can't support it.
Councillor Wilkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. As somebody who had a case full of baby clothes returned to me recently, and in that case were the toweling and flannel napkins that I had used with my 3 girls about 40 years ago. I can tell you now, that was all I had. We got through that period. I now have about 2 dozen very soft cloths that I'll use for dusters, or they can go out to a workshop somewhere. Perhaps one of my sons-in-law can use them in the workshops. But I don't support this. I think this is a personal expense that people undertake when they have children. If there are single mums or people in difficulties, financial difficulties, when these times are stretching everybody's budgets, there are community service organisations that can assist with extra payments to assist those mums who need extra help. But it's not a ratepayer expense as far as I'm concerned. We have so many priorities that we have to address in the 24-25 budget. I don't support this going through. And as I said, I consider it a personal cost, not a ratepayer cost. Thank you. As worthy as it is, that's my opinion.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Otherwise, if I have no one on the screen. Councillor Zing, you might wish to speak to second. Nothing to add? All right. Then I will go back to Councillor Jennings to summarise.
Thank you, everybody, for your input. With 2.6 billion tonnes of waste going to the tips around the country in 2023, removing just a little bit and baby steps, just a little bit at a time. Sometimes to get an idea moving, you just need an idea and you just need somebody to say it. West Torrens has said they've had reasonable success with it. Tea Tree Gully, not so much. I think Burnside is a bit of a leader, and a lot of councils look to us, and we should put our good foot forward. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? The motion is lost and division has been called, so those who supported the motion please stand. That's Councillor Henschke, Cornish, Hallett, Jennings and Zing. Those against, Councillors Harvey, Turnbull, Dawes, Hubel, Jones, Wilkins and Davey. As I said, the motion is lost. Now we move to Councillor Davey, the urgent assessment required of dead and dying Indigenous trees, page 26.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll read the motion out for those who haven't seen it before. That Council 1 receives an interim report by the end of August, early September 2023, which, following the soil and foliage testing recently undertaken, addresses the management of the issues associated with the dead and declining trees identified in Kensington Park Oval Reserve, plus the health of those in the vicinity, to outline the following. A, what has caused their decline or death, e.g. interference, disease, vandalism, contractor damage. B, what can be done as a matter of urgency to prevent any further decline of the trees still living, particularly those under threat. And C, when any dead and dying trees are able to be removed and replaced this planting season, hopefully, with advanced specimens, in addition to the tree recently cut down and marked for mulching. And 2, receives all associated information to determine if there are any other factors in the locale which may be affecting the health and survival of these or any other trees or plantings in the area. In my assessment, we have an environmental disaster happening here when we've got 10 or 12 very sick and dying Indigenous trees in one of our most significant parks. And as you can see in the photos that I've circulated, they have admittedly got sick quite quickly, But what has happened is that last year, the barbecue area was replaced in the park. It's a very highly utilised park. It's in the Pembroke campus, where there are volumes of students using it every day between their campuses. There's a huge number of sporting activities, huge volumes of walkers, runners, exercisers and dog parkers who use the area. So the barbecue was very welcome, but after the inclusion of the installation of the new barbecue, one of the big trees got very sick. Eventually, with the staff keeping an eye on it, but with no indication of why, it had branches removed and eventually died. So that's left there as a skeletal remain. Then earlier this year, other trees in the area, as shown in the pictures, have started to decline, with the two huge trees, or large trees, just near Oak Court, now totally dead. I had assumed that the park rangers and maintenance staff were keeping an eye on the tree. They'd been watching the large tree for a number of months, and I understood that arborists were keeping an eye on these. But since their decline, there's, as you can see in the foreground in one photo, another tree was removed in April this year, and then subsequently the rest have gone downhill very quickly. So I had no choice but to bring it to council. Since I've raised that, we've had some tests done for soil and leaf assessment, and I believe the results are due in a couple of weeks. So hopefully the report that comes back to us will be able to identify what is causing this decline and death of these trees, because they're all incredibly valuable assets, much loved by park users who are quite concerned about them. So hopefully you'll support this and we'll get a report and be able to identify quite quickly what's caused this really sad occasion.
Councillor Cornish, you wish to ask? Second it?
Second it,
Okay,
thanks.
and speak?
Reserve my right, thank you.
Councillor Dawes?
Yes, just a question, or a couple of questions for administration. The two photos that Councillor Davies has shown us, the first tree that was removed, was that the one that's got a yellow there in the second one, or is it another tree? I know Mr. Kant's not here, but was that the first tree to be removed? That's the question I have.
I'm not sure in Mr Kant's absence. I'll have to take that on notice.
Take that on notice? Okay. The second question, which can follow, I've read the CEO's comments and you're waiting for formal results. Will they answer the questions that have been asked in this particular motion?
Through Madam Mayor, we certainly hope they will. The challenge we have is that when we send samples to the labs interstate, it's not a blanket test where they test for example, say 20 things that may have killed it. We have to ask them to test for certain things. So with our experience, we are going to suggest they test for X, Y and Z. It is potentially an outcome that we won't know what caused these deaths, but we are certainly going to do our level best to try and find out.
Councillor.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, just while I have the floor, the team have just sent me an answer. The one with the yellow paint was removed in April, if that helps in any way. Councillor Dawes.
Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is, when was the actual testing of the trees done?
Through Madam Mayor, this answer may not be 100% correct, but my understanding it was done sometime in the last week.
Is there anyone else who wishes to ask questions or speak? If not, councillor Cornish, do you wish to speak to second? No? All right, then I shall go back to councillor Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your interest, everybody. I think it's self-evident what we've got here. We've got, I don't know, no one locally has seen any evidence of sabotage going on, but we don't know. The area adjacent to it and this car park is actually the Holden Street car park, which is the one we lock at night to prevent hooliganism there, and for the safety of the students who use the area and the local residents. It's locked at sunset at night and opened in the mornings. I don't know if there's any grievance there which might cause this. The locals haven't seen any activities. It's just very concerning that this would happen. In some cases, in the last 18 months, but then increasingly, suddenly and quickly. So I know how difficult it's been for the staff to manage it, but it's just tragic, these beautiful trees and significant numbers of loss. So hopefully you'll support this motion. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. Now that is the last item on the agenda tonight, unless there is any urgent or other business.
Any other business?
Councillor Turnbull.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I do have any other business. I realise that the rescission motion 13.4 cannot be reviewed for 12 months, and noting that the vote in the first instance was tied with the casting vote for the presiding member, could we please have an information session from reps from the different groups during the next 12 months so it can be reviewed again? Thank you.
Through Madam Mayor, it can be considered because it wasn't lost. It was simply withdrawn, so as if it never occurred. So it can be revisited during the next 12 months.
With an information session?
I'm not taking any, well, unless the Mayor's willing to accept a motion without notice.
No, I would expect that to be a motion on notice for the next council meeting, where you actually make a request for an information session in line of what, enlighten us as to what it is you want to discuss at that information session. Remembering, of course, that no decisions are made during an information session.
I'll just follow up, Madam Mayor. I'm certainly happy to work with you, Councillor Turnbull, just to work that through.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's nothing else, then I will close the meeting at 8:27. Thank you everyone for your attendance.